Do you often struggle trying to correct misunderstandings? I've noticed that my natural response to realizing there's a misunderstanding is to try to be even more direct, even more blunt, to make sure there's no room for error. And you may not be surprised to hear that that strategy often backfires, so today let's have a look at why that is. Hi everyone, Paul Micallef here from Autism from the Inside. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. Have you ever lived in a share house or another type of communal living situation where you have to get along with other people on a daily basis? These types of situations present many opportunities for misunderstandings, especially when trying to agree on how clean to keep a house, for example. So I was once living in a bit of a community living situation. I just moved in, and some feedback that I got relatively recently after moving in was something along the lines of, can you please make sure not to leave your dirty dishes everywhere? At first glance, that sort of seems fair enough. I'm like, okay, great. Point taken on board. I'm going to make sure that I clean my dishes after I use any kind of pots and pans or knives and forks or plates or anything like that. So I thought, great, I will make sure when I use something, I will wash it straight away. Problem solved. A little bit later, I got a very similar piece of feedback. Stop leaving your dirty dishes everywhere. Now, at this point, I'm starting to get a little bit confused because I've already heard that feedback before, and I've already implemented what I thought was a really good solution to that. In other words, make sure I clean stuff up straight away as soon as I use it. So I'm starting to get confused. Why am I still getting this feedback? This is the first kind of hint that there must be something a little bit going wrong here with this communication. I've got a couple of potential strategies to respond to that. I could say something like, I haven't left my dishes around. I've made sure to clean them up. That's option one. Option two might be to clarify, like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean don't leave my dishes around? Or number three could just be silently accept it. Yes, boss. I will definitely take that feedback on board, even though I don't really understand what the feedback is, because I thought I understood it, but now I clearly am getting signs that maybe I've misunderstood it somehow. In reality, when I often use the strategy of trying to clarify exactly what do you mean by this, it comes across as a little bit belligerent, a little bit like I'm trying to talk back. What do you mean by dirty dishes? That sounds like a really dumb question. What do you mean, what do I mean by dirty dishes? Don't leave your dirty dishes everywhere, please. In this particular case, I eventually found the source of the miscommunication, which I will share with you now because it will help us to understand the types of miscommunication that are possible in different situations. So let me translate the message. The message as delivered was, please don't leave your dirty dishes everywhere. The message that would have been the clearest to me so that I knew what to do, what to change my behavior, would have been, after you clean your dishes, please do not leave your clean dishes drying in the purpose-built drying rack next to the sink. Please instead take out a tea towel and dry it up straight away and put it straight back in the cupboard. So when they said, please don't leave your dirty dishes everywhere, what they meant was, can you please dry your already clean dishes and put them away straight away? Now, finally, I've got something that I can actually action, because previously with the misunderstanding, I had no idea what they were even asking me to do. So I'm curious if you've had similar experiences of something that seems like a really simple miscommunication, but every attempt to try to get clarity around what they actually mean or to clarify what you actually mean seems to make the situation worse. So let's look at some of the direct things that I actually said in this situation initially, or at least thought about saying initially, that I was thinking, is this going to be helpful in clarifying this situation? So some of the things I thought to clarify were things like saying, I don't really understand what you're asking me to do. Or other things like, I always clean my plates straight away, so I'm not sure why you're giving me this feedback. I'm trying to avoid coming across as openly hostile or in denial. Like, no, I didn't. You're just accusing me of something and I'm just going to deny that I even did it in the first place, which is probably what would have happened if I just said, but I don't leave my dirty dishes everywhere. What are you talking about? And then the response could have been, are you calling me a liar? Are you suggesting that the person who told me that they saw this is not trustworthy? All of these really, really complex social things that I'm like, I do not want to get into any of that. I just want to figure out what you mean by this really, really simple phrase. So I don't pretend that I've got a solution that works in every situation, but what I end up trying to do these days is call out the specific fact of what I see happening here. So number one, I see that there's a misunderstanding. Number two usually comes after one, not always, but very often. Number two is that this situation is hard for us both to understand because the communication seems so simple and so clear already that it's hard to fathom how a very simple sentence like, don't leave your dirty dishes everywhere, feels like it could be misunderstood at all. It feels like you're playing dumb. When I say, I'm not sure what you mean by dirty dishes, it's like, what's a truck? Don't play dumb with me. Why are you not understanding what I'm trying to tell you? So by calling that out and saying, I know this is really hard to believe, right? I'm struggling to believe it myself. It's really hard to believe, but I actually don't think I'm really getting what you're saying with that phrase, dirty dishes. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I'd really like to know what you mean by that so that I can take your feedback on board, because here are a couple of facts that are confusing me. For example, I wash my plates up straight away and I don't remember leaving it out, and I'd need a specific example if you had an example. And what I often find is when the more words that I use in that situation, the more chance there is of misunderstanding. So this can be insanely stressful to try and manage the emotions of someone else in a situation and try not to accidentally give the wrong impression when you're already digging yourself a hole. I was digging myself a hole. I'm very good at that. So that's my basic strategy. It doesn't always work, but it usually avoids some of the worst of the things that could possibly happen. I'm curious to hear what your strategies are in the situation. And I'm also cognizant that part of my strategy in this situation is to recognize the 4 emotional intelligence skill sets and try to, at the very least, stop actively making the problem worse while it's still relatively small. Otherwise, what tends to happen is I get really frustrated, the other person gets really frustrated, we're both really frustrated at each other, we're a lot less likely to be able to consider different points of view and actually come to a better understanding, and then the relationship breaks down, which is unfortunately a very recognizable common autistic pattern in my life at least, and maybe you can recognize that as well. So when trying to cut off a misunderstanding while it's still small, the very, very first thing that I'm going to notice is my reaction. So first emotional intelligence skill set is self-awareness of my own emotions. If I'm feeling a little bit frustrated that someone has given me the same advice twice, there's a clue there. Something is going on there. The next step, the next emotional intelligence skill set is to manage and regulate my own emotions. Because if I start to act out of that frustration and tell the other person how frustrating it is that they keep giving me this same advice, then that's unlikely to get to the heart of the situation, because it is very likely to miss some very important aspects of the situation. So once I am self-regulated, the next step is to assess the situation. What is going on here? Why am I keep getting this same advice from this same person? There must be something more going on. So I need to figure out what that is first, so that I can move on to the fourth emotional intelligence skill set, which is essentially managing relationships with other people. And I can only do that if I have figured out what's going on for me, so that I know that I'm acting in a way that is in alignment with my emotions and my reason at the same time. And then it's also based on the awareness of what's happening in the situation. And if I'm too caught up in my own head and my own frustration, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. Anyway, I don't know why I decided to include a mini EQ lesson in this video. But if you're interested in a much more in-depth look at emotional intelligence skills, you may know that I have an EQ 101 course, which is a self-guided course that you can do. That's completely online. And also, coming up in just a couple of weeks, I'm also running a free How to Learn Emotional Intelligence. What's the best way to learn emotional intelligence webinar that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So have a look at the website if you're interested in coming along to that. That is my special interest, as you've probably heard me say several times before. So I hope you've found today's little story and example interesting and relatable. I'd really love to hear if you have any better strategies than me of how to manage those kind of really basic misunderstandings. Like, how was I supposed to know that dirty dishes meant dishes that I had already cleaned and already put in the drying rack? Curious to hear if you have stories like that as well. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.